The wind doesn't just blow in the high country of Wyoming. It screams. It's a sound that can strip the skin off a man's soul if he stays out in it too long. Silas Thorne had lived in that wind for 15 years, alone, tucked into a cabin that smelled of cedar, old gun oil, and a past he'd tried to bury under a mountain of split wood. Before we find out what Silas did that night and the storm of fire it brought down upon his ranch, take a moment. If you find yourself drawn to these tales of the Old West, the raw, the rough, and the real, then hit that subscribe button. We tell the stories of history books we're too afraid to write. Join us by the fire. You don't want to miss what happens when the past finally catches up. He thought he knew every sound the wilderness could make. He knew the snap of a dry branch under a predator's paw. He knew the hollow whistle of a coming blizzard. But he didn't know the sound of a woman's fingernails scratching against his front door at 3 a.m. When he opened it, the cold hit him first, a brutal, bone-deep frost. Then she fell. She was wrapped in a horse blanket that was more blood than wool. Her skin was the color of wood ash. She looked like something the wolves had started on and given up on. Silas, a man who had seen the worst of the Civil War and the bloodiest of the border raids, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. He brought her to the fire. He worked with the steady, detached hands of a man who had patched up dying soldiers in the mud of Virginia. But as the warmth hit her, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She reached out, her fingers catching the front of his wool shirt, pulling him close until he could smell the copper of her blood and the scent of wild lavender. Her eyes were wide, glass-dark, and filled with a desperate, terrifying hunger. Her voice was a ghost of sound, a rasping plea that cut through the crackle of the hearth. "Don't stop," she whispered, her grip tightening with strength that shouldn't have been there. "I need more." Silas looked at the iron brand on her shoulder, still raw and weeping. He looked at the trail of blood leading back into the dark woods where riders were surely following. He looked at the bottle of medicinal whiskey and the cauterizing iron in the coals. He knew what she was asking for, and he knew the price he would pay for giving it to her. He hesitated. He thought of the peace he'd built. Then he did the unthinkable. The unthinkable wasn't just a surgery. Silas was a man of the law once, a man who believed in the order of things. But as he looked at the woman, whose name he later learned was Elena, he realized she wasn't just wounded. She was carrying a secret that was eating her from the inside out. The brand on her shoulder wasn't a cattle mark. It was a cipher. Symbols he recognized from the darkest corners of the territory. Marks of a shadow organization that dealt in gold, blood, and stolen lives. To help her meant to declare war on the most powerful men in the West. Silas didn't reach for his medical kit first. He reached for his floorboards. He pried up the heavy oak planks near the hearth, revealing a crate he hadn't touched in a decade. Inside lay a pair of Colt peacemakers and a Henry repeating rifle, kept in a state of perfect lethal readiness. By helping her, he was burying Silas the rancher. He was digging up Silas the reaper. He turned back to her. The infection was spreading. The more she asked for wasn't just warmth. It was a fire. She knew that the only way to survive what was in her blood was to burn the poison out. "It'll kill you or cure you," Silas muttered, his voice sounding like two stones grinding together. She just nodded, biting down on a piece of leather. He took the iron from the fire. It was glowing a pale, angry orange. The cabin grew silent, save for the roar of the wind outside. Silas took a breath, a prayer he didn't believe in flickering through his mind, and pressed the heat to the mark. The smell of scorched flesh filled the room. Elena's body arched, her eyes rolling back. But she didn't make a sound. She held his gaze until the world went black for her. Silas sat by her side for the rest of the night. He cleaned the wound. He fed the fire. He watched the horizon. He knew that by morning, the men who had put that mark on her would be able to smell the smoke. He was no longer a man with a quiet life. He was a man with a target on his back and a stranger in his bed. 3 days passed in a heavy, humid silence. The snow had turned to a gray, drizzling sleet that turned the ranch into a bog of mud and ice. Elena moved to the cabin like a ghost returning to a house she'd forgotten she owned. She didn't talk much. She watched Silas. She watched the way he moved, the limp in his left leg from a mini ball at Shiloh, the way he never sat with his back to a window, the way he cleaned his rifle every night as if it were a religious rite. Why? She finally asked on the third night. She was sitting at the table, wrapped in one of his oversized flannel shirts. Silas didn't look up from his whetstone. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Because I'm tired of burying people, he said. They'll kill you for this, she said softly. The men who marked me, they don't lose things. And they consider me a thing. Silas stopped sharpening. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the intelligence behind the trauma. He saw a woman who had been through hell and decided she liked the heat. In this valley, Silas said, nothing is owned. The land takes what it wants, and I take the rest. If they want you, they have to go through the land. And then they have to go through me. Elena reached across the table, her hand resting over his. Her skin was warm now, the fever gone, replaced by a steady, grounding heat. I've spent my whole life being a piece in someone else's game, she whispered. Teach me how to be a player. That was the second unthinkable act. Silas Thorne, who believed a woman should be protected from the world, spent the next week teaching her how to destroy it. If you're still with us, you're the kind of soul who knows that out here, the only thing more dangerous than a man with nothing to lose is a woman who's just found her teeth. If the story is hitting you in the places that matter, give us a like. It helps the legend grow. Now, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? The desert? The city? The mountains? Let us know. And don't forget to hit that bell. The real fight is just over the ridge. The training was brutal. Silas didn't go easy on her because she was small or because she was healing. He knew the men coming for her wouldn't. He taught her the rancher's draw, not the flashy, fast-twitch shooting of a dime novel outlaw, but the steady, calculated aim of a man who knows he only has one shot and can't afford to miss. He taught her how to listen to the horses, how to tell the difference between the wind and the pines, and the jingle a bit 2 miles down the trail. He saw her change. The softness left her jaw. Her eyes, once filled with the look of a hunted deer, became as sharp and cold as a winter creek. One afternoon, while they were out near the fence line, she turned to him. You're preparing for a funeral, she said, looking at the defensive positions he'd spent the morning digging. I'm preparing for an ending, Silas corrected. Is that all life is to you, Silas? A series of endings. He looked out over the valley. The sun was dipping low, casting long, bloody shadows across the mud. Out here, Elena, life is a gift, but survival is a trade. You trade your peace for your breath. Every day. She stepped close to him then. The tension between them wasn't just the coming war. It was the fact that two broken people had found the only other person in the world who understood the shape of the cracks. What if we didn't just survive? She asked. What if we lived? Silas started to answer, but the horses in the corral suddenly went still. Their ears spiked toward the south. Silas felt it before he heard it, a vibration in the ground. Not one rider. Not two. 6. Get to the cellar, Silas said, his voice dropping into that low, lethal register. No, Elena said, reaching for the peacemaker at her hip, the one Silas had taught her to use. You said the land takes what it wants. Tonight, I'm the land. They didn't come with a parley. They didn't come with a warning. The first torch hit the barn just as the sun winked out. The dry hay went up like a powder keg. In the orange glare of the flames, Silas saw them. The order. They wore black duster coats that looked like wings in the firelight. Silas was in the rocks above the cabin. Elena was in the loft. The lead rider, a man with a face like a hatchet and a voice that sounded like gravel in a tin can, called out, Thorne, we know you're holding the girl. She's property of the syndicate. Hand her over, and we might leave you enough of your ranch to bury yourself in. Silas didn't answer with words. He answered Henry. The first shot took the hatchet-faced man out of the saddle. The night erupted into a chaos of muzzle flashes and screaming horses. This wasn't a gunfight. It was a slaughter in the dark. Silas moved through the shadows like the reaper he used to be. Every time a rider tried to flank the cabin, a shot would ring out from the loft. Elena, steady and cold, picking them off with the precision Silas had beaten into her. But there were too many. One rider made it to the porch. He kicked the door in, a shotgun leveled at the interior. Silas was too far away. He screamed her name, his heart freezing in his chest. He saw the rider fire. But Elena wasn't in the center of the room. She was behind the heavy oak door Silas had reinforced. She stepped out, her face illuminated by the burning barn, and emptied her cylinder into the man's chest. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. By the time the moon was high, the fires were dying down. 5 men lay in the mud. The 6th was crawling toward his horse, his leg shattered. Silas walked down from the rocks. His coat was torn, a graze on his temple bleeding into his beard. He found Elena standing on the porch, looking at the carnage. She was shaking, not from fear, but from a sheer, overwhelming weight of what she had become to stay alive. Silas walked up to her. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask if she was okay. He simply took the gun from her hand and pulled her into his chest. "It's over," he whispered. "No," she said, pulling back just enough to look him in the eye. Her voice was stronger than it had ever been. "It's just the beginning. There are more of them, Silas. More girls. More marks. More poison." Silas looked at his burning ranch. He looked at the life he had tried to build. It was gone. All that was left was the wind and the woman. He did a final, unthinkable act. He didn't stay to rebuild. He didn't wait for the law. He walked to corral, saddled the 2 remaining horses, and handed her the reins. They rode out before the sun came up. Behind them, the smoke from the Thorne ranch rose in a single, straight pillar against the purple sky. People in the valley would tell stories about that night for years. Some said Silas Thorne had finally lost his mind. Some said he'd been kidnapped by a witch. But the few who knew the man, the few who had seen the look in his eyes when he talked about the war, knew the truth. Silas Thorne hadn't lost anything. He had finally found something worth fighting for. As they reached the crest of the ridge, Elena stopped her horse. She looked back at the ruins of her trauma and the man who had burned it out of her. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "You had a home." Silas looked at her. The wind caught his hat, but he didn't blink. A home isn't a place, Elena. It's the person who stands beside you when the world catches fire. She reached out, and for the first time, she smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of recognition. 2 predators, riding into the dark, ready to hunt the things that thought they were the hunters. "Don't stop, Silas," she said, echoing the words from that first night. "I won't," he promised. And they rode into the west, where the shadows were long and the stories never truly ended. The west is full of men who stood still and died, and women who ran until they found their strength. Silas and Elena are still out there, somewhere in the dust and the rain. If this journey meant something to you, don't leave the fire just yet. Subscribe, leave a comment, and let us know what you would have done in Silas's boots. Would you have opened the door? Would you have picked up the gun? Pour yourself another cup of coffee. Stay a while, and keep your eyes on the horizon. We'll see you in the next tale. Until then, keep your powder dry and your heart steady. The trail continues soon.